All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar about cultivating a compelling company culture and aligning your internal and external culture to retain and attract top talent. We're excited to hear from Keca Ward and Jason Nazar today. Keca is the Senior Director of Talent Experience at Phenom People, and Jason is the CEO of Comparably. So now we'll turn the time over to them to introduce themselves and get started.
Great, thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. My name is Keca Ward, and as she said, I am the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition. I've been at Phenom People for 2 years now, leading the talent and HR functions within the organization. I had started my career in the staffing and recruiting industry. I was fortunate enough to also own my own staffing company for about 10 years, and then moved on to an IT services firm where I got more involved in HR corporate organizations, acquired my master's degree in HR, and then finally landed at Phenom People. So welcome, and looking forward to talking with you guys today. Jason?
Thank you, and Keca, we're so happy to join you all today. We're huge fans of Phenom People and everything you do, and hello to everyone out there. Looking forward to connecting. I'm Jason. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Comparably. Many of you may know we're an employee review platform that really just try to be the most fair and accurate place to showcase your company reputation. And we're based in Los Angeles. I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is the 4th company I've started, sold my previous company to Intuit. I invest in a lot of companies in the tech space, sit on a couple boards. I write for Wall Street Journal, Inc., Forbes, Fortune, and I've spent the last 3 years diving in to this HR world to try to figure out how to build great company cultures and to reflect that publicly, and excited to share these learnings with you all today.
Great, thanks, Jason. So before we get started, just as a housekeeping, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat room. As well, we will have an hour today for our webinar. If we have time at the end, we will answer some of your questions. If we cannot get to your questions, we certainly will each reach out to you directly to answer them. So we're excited again, as I mentioned, Jason and I talk about company culture and how organizations are putting forth so much time and energy, but is it really working? We'll be exploring this and many other topics around culture today. Too often, companies fail to align their internal culture with their external brand, and this threatens employee retention and prevents job seekers from truly understanding how the company stands out from the competition.
And part of what we're going to share today too are just these best practices and lessons of taking a great company culture that a lot of us are working to build and how to leverage that publicly, like Keca said, to bring in better quality talent, to retain talent, to help drive more investment and press. And so we're going to be sharing those best practices later on.
Great. So our first main topic today is leadership needs to embrace a meaningful culture. And as we think about that, why is it really important for leadership to embrace company culture? The foundation of the culture needs to start at the top. Leaders are the ones that empower their employees. They need to set good examples, set good behaviors. They also must be at the forefront of the mission and values of the company. This is what drives an organization to success. Leaders really have responsibility to demonstrate their beliefs and reinforce the culture based on the company values, but also on their own behaviors. Their behavior as leaders is critical to how they interact with others. It sets the example for the whole entire company culture. As an example, if they're walking into the office every day and they walk into their closed office door, this type of behavior sets an example of not being open-minded, not encouraging cross-functional communication. Another example of bad behavior that doesn't encourage good company culture would be if they're late for team meetings. If they walk in 10 minutes late, this type of example sets a tone for other employees to walk in late. Again, not the type of example that leaders need to represent. So now Jason's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the statistics around this.
Great. And can you all hear me still?
Yeah.
So there's a couple key statistics that you all should be aware of. The first is that companies that have great cultures really have leaders that are at the forefront of listening to their employees. And organizations that feel like they don't have non-winning cultures really don't say that they're, they talk about their leaders not being as engaged with those teams and listening to them. And there's a stat that we did from a study on the next slide coming up. We polled over 10,000 workers and we asked them, does your existing company focus on improving your company culture? And 40% of employees said no. And the reason we found the stat so important is, think of all of you listening to this webinar right now, and I'm sure most of us feel like, well, we focus on improving our company culture, but statistically speaking, 2 out of 5 of you on this webinar are working on companies, are in companies where your teams don't believe that the employers are focused enough on improving the company culture. And we have to be aware of that perception. Now, the fact that you all are on probably means that you're in that 60% and not the 40%, but that's a huge number of folks that believe their company cultures aren't improving. And company culture is directly about the bottom line. And part of our job in HR and in communicating with C-level execs is to show how company culture drives things like productivity. And there's this great stat from Gallup that shows how company culture drives more employee engagement and productivity boosts by over 20% because of great company cultures. And even more specifically than that, great company cultures drive more revenue, right? Over a period of 7 years, companies that had the most engaged workers drove 2.5 times more revenue than the ones that didn't. And so part of what we're looking to do is be able to make a case of why we should keep investing in great company cultures, and that it's not just a feel-good effort, but it's going to drive more productivity, it's going to drive more revenue for our organizations, and it's going to drive more growth for our fast-growing companies.
Yeah, I agree, Jason. It not only impacts the bottom line, but also for engaging and retaining talent. And I know it's something we're going to talk about further on in the webinar, but that's also another important statistic. As we look at scaling a future-proof culture for high-growth companies, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We are trying to tackle that here at Phenom People because we are growing at rapid pace. So I'm excited to share the next few slides with you. So the Phenom story is really hyper growth. When I joined 2 years ago, we were probably about 100 employees, and today we are over 500. And scaling our culture keeps me up at night. So the programs that we've put in place stem from creating really great onboarding programs, coming up with programs for our employees to have continuous learning as the company grows. Also ensuring that managers really reinforce the behaviors that the organization sets, and making sure our managers are armed, not only hiring managers, but our whole management team is armed with programs and incentives to not only engage their employees, but also encourage them to be the best person and be their best self. And if managers are instilling these behaviors, then employees will follow along. We know that for a fact.
And we really focus on building a great company culture from where it starts at the beginning, which is the hiring process. And I've got a pretty strong held set of beliefs here. I've spent the last 10 years trying to focus on building great company cultures. And there's only so much we can do as organizations and leaders after the fact of whom we hire. My belief is that 80% of what leads to a great company culture is just picking the right people to begin with. If we have folks that are engaged and are excited and are passionate, then they're going to be the ones that drive the company culture without all this process needed. And if we have people that are average culture players or even worse, culture offenders, then almost nothing we do after the fact of hiring is going to improve our company culture meaningfully. And for the past 15 years, I've given the same talk to every single person that I've ever hired. And I've given this talk, 500 times, 1,000 times now, I'm not sure. And there's 3 things that we look for in every single person we hire at the companies that I build. The first is that they're the best at what they do. And that's really important, that they feel like that they're the best, and that's why they're being picked. but as importantly, they know that they're joining a team of people that are all stars themselves. And when they walk into the company day one, they're going to be surrounded with people that are best at their jobs. The second thing, and we tell this to every single person we hire, there's an absolutely no asshole policy. There's just no room in a fast-growing company where we're focused on hyper growth and achieving massive goals for people that are passive-aggressive or mean-spirited or political or aren't going to go the extra mile. And my rule of thumb is anyone in our company should be able to call anybody else at 2 in the morning saying, hey, I'm stuck, I need some help. And anyone on that team should want to come be by their side. And the third value that we have is that we're going to work harder than everybody else. And what's important is that we've habitualized this process for every new hire that comes on. And so everybody gets the speech. We talk about it all the time. It's an ethos of our company culture. And we focus on nailing company culture in the hiring process up front.
Some of the things that we do here at Phenom is starts at our interview process and recruiting our talent into Phenom. And we spend a lot of time and effort on personalization. We provide a not normal interview process. So what that really entails is going above and beyond to make that candidate feel welcome at Phenom. We have a special interview room for them with the comfy couch and make it really homey for them. We have them during the recruiting phase ask each candidate what their favorite songs are. So during the interview breaks, we're showcasing their favorite songs so they don't have that nervous feeling, and really providing that not normal interview process for each of the candidates as they come in and making it very personalized to each of them. Another thing that we do around personalization is something that's important that each of you can do on the call is if you have your core values as an organization, which are near and dear and important to at least the Phenom culture, is really hitting home with them early on in that interview process, because it's going to carry with them through the rest of their career here at Phenom if it's important to them. And so we have each of the applicants that come in for an interview submit a core value video, and really what that entails is to select one of the core values that resonates the most with them and share. You know, they grab their phone, it's not Academy Award presentation, but just a simple clip, and they send it in to the recruiter, and the recruiter then passes it on to the hiring team. And we get some really, really great and innovative videos that come through. It's super easy to do, it's no cost, and it is scalable, which is nice when we're talking about scalability. It's something that everyone has a personal mobile phone and can be doing in an instant. It doesn't take too much time. So our leadership here takes a very active role in our culture, as I mentioned, and it's very near and dear to the Phenom culture. It starts at the top, and how we recognize each of our core values is we give out quarterly awards based on the employees that demonstrate the core value nominated by other employees. And we have quarterly what is called CRISPY Awards, which is an acronym for our core values. And these awards are given to those employees who exemplify those core values. We give one for each value, and then we also give an overall award each quarter for the one that exemplifies all 5 core values. So I think, Jason, you guys are doing something a little bit similar over there.
We are, yeah. And one of the things I even want to address, I love, Keca, everything that you're doing in the not normal interview process. You know, yeah. For me, even hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking, I want to interview at Phenom people. That seems really cool. And it's just so important. You know, we have all this workplace data on what people are looking for. And one of the biggest things that people talk about is their interview process, right? They write about it publicly on sites like Comparably and Glassdoor. And, you know, think about the market that we're in, the war for talent, and how every candidate we're making an offer on that we really want, they're getting other offers. And so that experience that you've created at Phenom people, it's a big part now of converting candidates. And it also sets the tone for what it's going to be like when they're there on the first day. And I think this is just an area that a lot of companies are under optimized on. And in fact, the larger organizations we work in, it's harder to do things that are out of the box, and it gets more bureaucratic and process oriented. And for me, for example, our office is 2 blocks from the beach in Santa Monica. And I'm just not a big fan of, sitting across a desk and having a 45-minute conversation. So a lot of things that we do with our candidates is we go for, a half hour, an hour walk. And we try to just get to know who that person is and what they're looking for in their next job. And just be in a relaxed environment where somebody can show a bit more of who they are. And I think what you're doing at Phenom people for that non-traditional environment is just so incredibly important. So I absolutely applaud you for it. And maybe in the Q&A, we'll hear examples of what other people are doing as well. Yeah. Coming back to this slide, one of the things that we really try to focus on is make sure your values and mission are public. Imagine that you have this incredible asset and you just hid it away. It is so important in this job market that we position ourselves as mission and purpose-driven companies. And this is off the chart importance with millennials and Gen Z. All of our workplace data on Comparably shows that more than any other group of people before them, millennials are looking for companies that are purpose-driven and that they feel connected to their mission. In many cases, they will rank that as importantly as how much they're getting paid at a company. And so there is a massive generational shift here. And so, for example, is it easy for our job seekers to find our values and missions online? Is it a quick Google search away? That's part of what we try to do to help companies and promote them to do so themselves. And we even, as a company that focus on company culture, make mistakes. Like, we have our core values of winning together, transparency, integrity, growth, innovation. And we just did a recent big hiring spurt, and we had a bunch of our employees say, hey, we haven't even seen or heard of you talking about our own company culture values. So we did an entire offsite day and did a whole session around it. And so these missions and values are really meant not just to be words that make us feel good on a sheet of paper, but to actually drive alignment and purpose around the people within the company, but to be a source of purpose and attraction for people outside of the organization. And so our big piece of feedback that we'll go into more later is make these public in as many places as possible, on your career site, on your job board. And again, it should be a simple Google search away that for any of your organizations, if somebody went in and typed in Twitter values, Netflix mission, Microsoft, mission statement, that people are going to be able to find that content right away. And then, we're talking about, we talked about our values. I think there are 2 values that come up a lot in organizations that are scaling quickly. So for those of you that are on teams where you're hiring a lot of people, your company is going to look pretty differently than it does, 12 months from today than it does today. I think part of what we talk about is that there's 2 values. Like, obviously, we want to have cultural values around agility. We need workers that can, work with a blank canvas, that can wear lots of different hats, that are going to be creative, that don't need to process for every single thing that's done. And I think it's important in fast-growing, scalable companies and venture-backed companies where we're going to go from hundreds to thousands of employees, from thousands of employees to tens of thousands of employees, that we have to have a value that supports that sense of growth. Now, what that needs to be combined with, and what you see a lot of organizations try to balance, is constantly talking about the importance of integrity. We're going to grow fast, we're going to be agile, but we're going to do it the right way. We're going to do right by each other. We're going to have the highest ethical standards. We're going to treat each other with all due respect. We're going to always put our customers first. And I think the companies that you see from a cultural perspective and values do really well, do a really good job of balancing those 2 values, not just in talk, but in practice. And obviously there's multiple examples, when you think of where Uber was 3 years ago and how they prioritized growth at all costs. It created all these repercussions of an unhealthy company culture that had massive consequences on their business. We'll talk more about this later, but company cultures and your employer brand end up starting to affect your customers. There was a whole campaign for delete Uber, not because of what the Uber product or service was like, but because of how the employees inside the company were being treated, and that bled over to how customers were choosing to spend their dollars with that company. And so everything that we're talking about here today is reinforcing the company culture is not just this internal set of practices to feel better about what we do. It affects revenue, it affects growth, it affects investors, it affects press, and it affects retention. And so later on, we'll get into some practices that great companies are doing to actually drive more of those results with their company culture. So a couple of things that we do that, you know, I've seen other great organizations and pretty much everything, you know, we do at Comparably, I've, you know, taken creative license and stolen from other organizations that I love. But I'm a big fan of getting the team together as much as possible. And so, for example, on Monday, we do an all hands to start after we do specific team meetings. And we do three things. The first thing we do is we just talk about our weekend and said who had the best weekend. And actually the team votes on who had the best weekend and they get a prize because we want to support work-life balance. It's not all just about what we do at work, but holistically how we're feeling about our lives. The second thing is we lead a stretch just so that we're moving and there's some laughter and that we get our blood going. And then we talk about, you know, not just the goals for the week, but there's a simple paradigm that I've used for the past decade, which is what's the one most important thing. So I'll ask the team to write down on a Post-it note, what's the one most important thing you can do today and this week that will move our company culture and move the business as fast as possible. And then we focus on those specific goals together. And then in our case, you know, we're still a startup. And so we do have a full open door policy. I mean, our goal is to have a flat organization. And part of the conversation that I have with every single one of our team members is I say, imagine coming into Comparably and that you're the CEO. How would you act? How would you be interacting with other people? How would you conduct yourself? What would you prioritize? And I want people thinking, I want every single one of our team members thinking that they're a leader no matter what their role is. And part of what that means too is that they can come to us and talk about any key thing. And so we have a policy where, you know, if I'm not on a sales call or other key senior members aren't in the middle of an immediate deliverable, somebody can come in and talk about, you know, a problem they're trying to solve, how they're feeling about work overall, give any suggestion, do a quick brainstorm. And we want just people to know that we're all in this together and that every voice is equally as important.
Yeah, that's great, Jason. We also have that open door policy here at Phenom as well. And also I want to share, I love the sharing what you did this weekend. We do something similar at our team meetings as well. We start every meeting with sharing something positive that happened in the last few days since we met. And it's usually personal as well. And we really get to know each other a little bit better, and it's great. But having that open door policy, we encourage here at Phenom. We don't have any cubicles or offices. It's an open floor plan. Our CEO sits right on the floor. He's actually one row away from me. So we have that environment where is similar to Comparably, where everything and everyone is available at any time, and that cross-functional teamwork is very relevant in a culture that's openness, and that's how we are scaling culture here.
And just to add to that, I think one of the most important things companies can do is habitualize more regular all hands. And obviously this gets more complicated in an organization with 1,000+ employees. But in our case, and in companies that I'm on the board of and invest in, I always advise do this at least once a week. And so we do ours every Wednesday. I think that Phenom People does them on Friday, and there's good reasons to do both. In our case, I like doing our all hands Wednesday because it's hump day. And, people are thinking about like, oh, there's still a lot to go in the week. So it gives us something to look forward to. And we spend an hour and a half together. We bring in a catered lunch for the entire team. And the first half hour, we've just started implementing doing lunch and learns. And what we do here is that any team member can get up and talk about something that they're passionate about and give a presentation. And we actually encourage people to talk about things that aren't work related. And so you get to see people in a different light and just have people share these things that they're really excited and passionate about. And then that second hour, we go through our key metrics, our 5 key metrics as a company. And we have different folks in the team stand up and give quick 2-3 minute presentations on where those metrics are and what key learnings they've had and what big updates there are. And what's really important about that is to not just have the most senior person on the team do the speaking, but to have a variety of voices and empower people that may not typically get to address a large audience at your company, be able to do so. And that's also the opportunity to keep reinforcing those values, to talk about what's important about the company mission, the company values. And the best thing that the company leaders can do, right, going back to Keca's advice, the culture needs to start with a leader, is really just to give anecdotes of something that happened in the business and how the set of values applied. And it may be a situation with a customer where, hey, we had this tough decision, and so we went to our values, and so we made decision B instead of decision A. It may be a situation on the team, and you can talk about how the mission is guiding it. A lot of times, we're thinking about doing different priorities as a company, and it's an opportunity for leaders to step up and say, hey, the reason why we're focused on this one area is because this is what's pertinent to our company mission. And so we're going to make business decisions that follow our mission and values as a company.
Yeah, I love it, Jason. And I know we have many, many folks on the webinar today, and some of you are much larger organizations than a Phenom people and a Comparably, but I'm here to tell you that it can be also scalable in large companies. And examples that we have are, a company like Netflix, right? They have a very, very unique culture. Patty McCord was very instrumental in leading the way on the culture at Netflix. I really love what she did. She basically eliminated the employee handbook and came out with a culture deck that states, do the right thing. Just as Jason mentioned, like if you walk in the door and treat yourself as a CEO, what would you be doing as the CEO of the organization? Treat each other with respect and really treat the company as it is your own. We know Netflix has an amazing story and culture, and that simple mind shift in a large organization can really showcase your brand, both internally and externally. Another great example, which we're all familiar with, is Zappos, and they are pretty much the king of culture. I know you can actually visit the Zappos campus and do a culture tour. It's a few-day event, which is pretty amazing. And there's just a quote here from Tony Hsieh that they actually pass on a lot of really smart, talented people that they know that if they're not a culture fit for the company, they do not hire them. I love that. I've also
and Keca, there's a great book that Tony wrote called Delivering Happiness. That's all about how to build a great company culture.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate to get to do an interview with him together in Las Vegas for about an hour, and so we can send that afterwards as well too if folks find it helpful.
Yeah, I didn't read it, so I'd be interested to know about that. Does he talk about the boot camp onboarding where they offer $2,000 to any employee who doesn't want to be with the company after the onboarding? I don't know if that's part of the book. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's a big part of it. The first half is really just about his journey as a leader, and then the second half is these amazing set of practices and principles. I mean, this quote that we have up in the presentation is just a perfect example of how Zappos turns down great talent that can drive bottom line results because they don't believe it's a culture fit.
Right, love it. So it's happening in very large organizations as well. So it's not just for your startups and folks of our size. It's little changes, little mindset change can really make a huge impact to the bottom line of an organization.
And I'll jump in here, right? And the really important thing about leveraging our company culture is that it shouldn't just be something that exists internally in the company. It should be made external to drive all these other key benefits. And so what we're going to go into now is a set of best practices that companies do of all sizes, large, medium, and small, to make sure that they have an amazing reputation that accurately reflects and is supercharged by that company culture. And the key takeaway here is that our internal company culture will drive our external brand. And our company culture is going to, at the end of the day, drive key benefits outside of just the culture itself. The first is it's the glue that retains and holds our talent. Arianna Huffington has this great quote where she says the company culture is, the health system of a company. It's its immune system. And what she's basically talking about is when a company is doing great financially and everything's going amazingly, it's easy to overlook a whole bunch of things that are wrong. But what happens when you miss that first quarter, or when there is a pivot that needs to be in the business, or when we need to go through a strategic change? The company culture is the immune system for our organizations that hold things in line and will prevent us having a lot of good talent walk out the door in those cases. And to the next slide, we all know that this is absolutely imperative to bringing in great talent. And what's important is that we want to make sure that we have a public reputation that really reflects what our internal culture is. And as I've talked to literally thousands of HR leaders over the past 3 years, and I'm hearing the stories that you're all telling me, which is that it's just so frustrating because what people see publicly about our company is not the culture that we know that we have. And so how do we make sure that there's this fair and accurate representation publicly that showcases what it's really like to work at our companies, so we get the benefit of driving in this great, amazing talent? There's a couple key stats about employer branding that a bunch of you probably know really well. The first is that the vast majority of job seekers are looking and researching about your employer brand before they even apply for your job. And the reason this is so important is you all are either in talent or you're working with counterparts on the talent side that go after metrics like cost per hire. And we're all optimizing for a lower cost per hire. But the hidden cost of this is if we have bad public reputations, especially if they're not accurate, then that cost per hire metric is massively jumping up because there's 3/4 of candidates that may just turn away from ever applying from us because they don't see something publicly about the company that reinforces why they should be working there. And social media is becoming more and more important. 80% of job seekers are doing research on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And by the way, they are not just going to look at the resources that the company puts out. That's baseline, that's table stakes in this market today, right? It's just entry to get in the building that we as employers have to be putting out great content on all these social platforms that people can easily find through our corporate accounts. What employees are really looking for now is they're researching, they're doing keyword searches, and they're saying, okay, well, what are these folks saying on Twitter? What are the employees saying on LinkedIn? And the stat that's so powerful is that job candidates trust employees 3 times as much as they do as employers to get accurate information working at the company. It's why employee review platforms are so powerful, because people just expect that it's a more truthful, honest place to get information, even if many times it's not. And so the key question becomes, if job seekers trust our team members dramatically more than us as the company to understand what it's like to work at our organizations, how do we effectively unlock the honest and great feedback our employees are having to bring in those job seekers as successfully and as quickly as possible? Just a little small case study we happened to see the other week. Lever put out that Bamboo HR said that 94% of all their hires either researched them on Glassdoor or Comparably before they got hired. This is just a simple, specific example to that stat we gave before. And if we go on to the next slide. So if that's the story that we all need to make sure that we're following, if we know that we need to have an external brand that is accurately reflective of our real company culture, that's going to help drive more retention, that's going to get more talent, that's going to get better quality investors, that's going to get us better press, how do we actually do it? How do you align your internal culture with your external brand? And so let's share a couple best practices here. So what is it that candidates are really wanting to know about your company culture? And the big thing I'd say here is they're trying to just get an honest, accurate look. And the really interesting thing is that they assume that employee review sites are going to be the best source of information because it comes directly from the candidates. One really simple best practice is one of the things that massively affects candidates' perception of us as companies is simply responding to employee review sites publicly. So I'd encourage you to do this on the competitor Comparably Glassdoor. You can do it on comparably.com. But we've heard over and over again that employees that see that they're engaged employers not only are more likely to apply to them, but they take any of that feedback that's really heinous and negative with more of a grain of salt, knowing that the employer is adding their perspective as well too. And candidates are just trying to find a source of truth. They're just trying to find out what it's really like to work at your organizations. And so that's going to get to our set of recommendations of best practices here coming up. So how do we tell this better story about our internal company culture externally? There's a couple powerful ways to do it. Obviously, employee reviews. And the important thing is that employee reviews can't and shouldn't just live on some third-party site like Comparably. They should be embedded into your job posts. They should be on your career site. They should be in materials that we give to candidates that influences their decisions. You know, Phenom People has this really amazing company culture. And one of the things I've seen you all do amazing, Keca, with us and with Glassdoor is take this employee feedback that's coming up about how much people love working at your organizations, and you expose it everywhere. You know, Phenom People's promoting this online and social media. You've embedded your culture scores from Comparably on the front page of your career site so that people are seeing front and center when they're looking to apply to work at Phenom People, what experience other folks are having. And again, what's so important about social media is not just the information that comes from the corporate accounts, but people are doing keyword researches to see what your employees are saying. So we as leaders of HR and of talent need to jumpstart that process. We need to give our team members some content that they can share online that they're proud of, and do it in a way that's authentic and doesn't just come off as a bunch of marketing to promote the company, which job seekers will smell through really quickly. And so one of the most powerful ways to do that is with Best Place to Work Awards. This is just such a great mechanism to leverage some third-party brand, often major media outlets like USA Today or Fortune or Forbes or Business Insider or CNBC, to have those media outlets confirm what a great company culture you all in this webinar have, and then reinforce that in your job posts and email signatures on social media. So Glassdoor does these awards. There's a company called Great Places to Work. We at Comparably do quarterly Best Place to Work awards, and we do categories like companies that are best for women and best for diversity. And so what we can do is highlight the great things that companies are providing their teams, and then leverage that promotion to get all kinds of benefit in terms of talent attraction.
Yeah, Jason, I think we look back 18 months ago when you and I first, started our partnership with Comparably. Since then, we've won countless awards, and as you mentioned, we showcase them everywhere, including our website. But it's not only for when we think about talent. Just an example that happened to Phenom was, your clients are also interested in this information, and one of our clients actually read an article that we won a Comparably award and went up to our CEO and said, "Hey, I heard you're one of the great leaders for women," and she was female herself, and it just resonates so much to showcase it at all places, not only for acquiring talent, but keep in mind that your clients are also a part of your external brand, and they're seeing and showcasing this as well. So.
It's such a thoughtful example. And really, you and I have talked about this before, Keca. Remember when we first connected, A company's employer brand is no longer their employer brand. It's just the company's brand. You know, there is, in 5 years from today, I don't think we're going to be talking about employer brand that's something that solely exists and live in HR, or even having the qualifier before employer. You said it perfectly. This doesn't just affect hiring. It doesn't affect our internal retention. Our customers are looking to who we are as companies and who we are as leaders, and the kind of experience that we provide to our team to decide whether they want to work with us or not. And so there are these 5 recommendations that we have to make sure that you can leverage this great internal company culture to support your external brand. And the first is, let's be authentic. And that really means 2 different things. The first thing that it means is we have to have a public reputation that matches what it's really like. If we either try to manufacture our public reputation of who we are as an employer and make it look too polished and good, then when people come in, it'll actually prevent them from moving forward in that talent process. And I've actually had a lot of HR leaders say, we want to be thoughtful about how we represent our public brand, because we know we have a lot of work to do internally. And until our internal team feels like that's where we're at, we don't want that public representation. So it creates a disconnect. The other thing about authentic is just the kind of materials that are out there. If someone's seeing this really glossy, polished, too fancy view of what it's like to work at your company, then honestly, it's easy to look over it just like you would an ad in a Facebook feed. And so I love, Keca, what you all are doing with these just homemade videos that applicants do in the process. And I've seen the reverse. I've seen a lot of companies do a simple tactic where they'll go to their employees and just ask them to hold up their iPhone, take a selfie video for 15 seconds talking about what they love working at their organization and what they want to keep seeing improved. They'll package it together and they'll just put it out online. And it's just such an authentic representation of what a company culture is actually like. The second key thing is, let's not lose talent due to an unmanaged reputation. There is a public employer reputation about each of us out there, and it is either costing us candidates, it is either turning those candidates away before they apply, or they're down to the final 3 offer letters, and they're like, you know what? This one company seems like it's got a bunch of people issues and these other 2 don't. I'm not even going to focus on this first one that has a bad reputation. And that happens all the time. I have HR leaders tell me every week, we lost a candidate last week because somebody read some awful thing online that we know isn't true or accurate or even came from a verified employee. And so let's make sure that we have a talent brand that is supporting bringing in people in the most competitive market we've ever had. Right? And the fact of the matter is, employees have the leverage in this market. It is an employee-driven market where, especially for top talent, they are getting multiple offers, and we have to go out and find those folks. And one of the main things that they're going to do before they decide to join our organizations is make sure that our brand supports what they feel like they want to be working at. The third thing, and Phenom People does an amazing job of this, is our job posts and our career boards are marketing. You know, nobody wants to see this old, stodgy, boring, long page of text of a job description that nobody reads, right? Or a career site that you go to that looks like it was built in 1997 and you're clicking around endlessly just trying to find the information that you're looking for, right? So Phenom People does an amazing job of improving those boards overall for companies. But part of what we want to do is we want to add employee feedback into it. Everywhere someone's reading a job post, they should see what your employees think and feel about the organization. And even more importantly, make that feedback specific. So when someone's seeing a marketing job post for your team in Seattle, make sure they're seeing what your marketing team in Seattle thinks about working at the company. When they go to your career site, if you won these awards, if you have great employee testimonials, you know, any CMO will tell us that on any page that's meant to drive conversion to buy a product or service, what you're going to want to have in that flow is a testimonial. You're going to want to have some outside referential point saying that you should buy this product and service because I did and I had a great experience. Well, how many of us make sure that on every single one of our job posts or career site, We have that same referential point and testimonial saying that our own employees love working for us. We've talked about a bunch about number 4, that our social brand is vital. And again, what's key here is not just that we put out information at the corporate level. That is table stakes. We have to turn our teams into the ones that are authentically talking about why they love working at our company. And that goes to the final point. And we all know here that the best source of talent that we're ever going to find comes from employee referrals. And so if we can unlock our team's social networks, if we can give them the content that they can easily put online, or that they can be proud to share that they've won an award because Phenom People CEO just won as the best CEO for women or best CEO for diversity, that immediately unlocks their entire network on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter as potential referral sources of talent into our organization. The simplest tactic I can share with each of you is make sure that you own your brand in Google searches. Thousands of people every single day are searching for your companies in Google, and they're either seeing content right away that supports you having a great company culture, or it's scaring them away, right? So we work with this company, Acorns, a great company based out of New York and Los Angeles. Every time somebody spends money, the change left over from that purchase automatically goes into an investment account. They've got millions of millennials using the service. And now when you search for Acorns culture, their Comparably page is the first page you see. And it doesn't make a difference if it's your Comparably page that shows up number 1, or your Glassdoor page, or your own website and blog. But what does matter is that as people put in, as job seekers, and as your team, and as Keca said, your customers put in these search queries about what it's like to work for your organizations, that we have really good, valuable content that shows up in those first 2 or 3 results that are fair and accurate and reflective of what it's really like to work at your organization, right? That's why one of the things that we do at Comparably is when we work with companies, we ensure that only verified employees of the company can leave public feedback, which is very different than how other employee review sites work. And if we go to the next slide that we have, this is one of the most important things I can share with each of you. We did a whole bunch of research over 6 months, and these are the 12 most searched terms for each of your company. So if you want to think of, 90% of what job seekers, of what your own existing team, of what potential customers, of what press are looking for about your organization, it's comprised from these terms. So let's say you worked at Microsoft. They'd be looking for terms like working at Microsoft, Microsoft culture, Microsoft reviews, Microsoft benefits, Microsoft leadership, Microsoft mission. Let's say you work even at a smaller organization, a mid-sized company like Dollar Shave Club based out of Los Angeles. People are searching for Dollar Shave Club salaries, Dollar Shave Club diversity, interviewing at Dollar Shave Club, Dollar Shave Club jobs, office photos, CEO. And if we can ensure that as those sets of stakeholders, job seekers, our current team, press, customers, do these Google searches, that it's taking to content that's accurate and fair and reflective and showcases what makes our company culture so special, then we are going to create a talent brand that is supercharged in this company culture, right? As Keca started off the presentation in the beginning, like, we're all spending all this time on culture. Is it really making a difference, right? And that company culture is not just about what happens internally in the company anymore. It's about how we leverage it for all these public attention to drive these benefits.
Great. We do have a few minutes. I think we can get to 1 or 2 questions. If we don't get to all of the questions, feel free to reach out to either Jason or I directly. We're both on LinkedIn. We would gladly entertain continued conversation. But let's tackle a few of these, Jason, that came in. Can you see the questions, or should I read them? I'm not sure.
I can see the questions, yeah. So if you pick which one, we'll dive into them together.
Okay, great. So let's start with the, what if we're doing all these things plus the free beer and it's still not enough? I love that one. And we didn't really talk too much about the free beer, but certainly that was part of the initial slide. But you know, I would want to know a little bit more, obviously, about the reasons it's not working, what the employees are saying, all the things that you have tried. But again, is it not coming from the top? That would be my one question. It's pretty hard not to have an environment where you rely on core values, mission-driven company, great interview process, and really pushing employees to do more, that it wouldn't work unless it's not supported by the top. So I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Jason, on that one.
Yeah, I think, Courtney, you know, I can hear the frustration and the question of like, hey, we do all these things and it's still not enough. And you're right, it isn't. And the reason it's not enough is because we are in the most unique talent market that perhaps any of us have ever lived through. And so I don't think the standard should be that it's enough. The standard should be right now is better than. Meaning if we didn't do those things, where would you be, right? What kind of talent would you be getting in the door? And the fact that it feels like it's never enough is probably how most of us as leaders and as culture leaders and as talent leaders are going to feel in this market. But the idea is, are doing all these things a better alternative and getting better results than we would than if we weren't doing all these things?
Yeah, agreed. Okay, the next question is, what do you do when attendance at the weekly luncheons drops off? How do you keep people coming and moving calendar events to attend? So one of the things we do at Phenom after our first 30 minutes is kind of highlights, mission, values, employee highlights. Our last 30 minutes we spend overviewing a new department. And it's really up to the department to come in and showcase for 30 minutes what they do for the organization. We rotate around, so different departments get to speak each week. And that is one way that I think you can get people more interested, because each week it's a different department showcasing what they're doing inside the organization. You get to meet the team. You also might be interested in moving to that team. So for instance, if I'm an entry-level sales individual and the marketing department is presenting, I might have not even known that I'm interested in marketing until after I hear exactly all the functions of what the marketing department does. So that might be one way to change it up a little bit, to engage with other people within the organization. And then something else that we do here is we also have an open Q&A at the end of each weekly all hands, which usually gets a lot of attention as well, because it's open forum, it's anonymous. And then lastly, the other thing that we've just implemented in the last 2 months, which has really driven attendance, is we have, as I mentioned, we give out weekly core value award winners. And if you nominate your fellow employee, you are thrown into a pool each week, and the nominated employees are also thrown into a pool, and we select one each week at the all hands, and they each 2 employees come up and do a golf putt. And if they make the golf putt, which is nearly impossible, by the way, they enter their chance to win $100 at, I think it's an Amazon gift card. I'm not really sure what the $100 award is, but something along those lines. So the amount of people that gather around to watch this amazing golf putt, and it's truly engaging. So that's just some of the things that we're doing here to make it, to drive more attendance. And I'm sure many of you have other ideas out there, but that's what we're doing here at Phenom.
Yeah, I'd probably add 3 quick tips. And then I think the last question would be a great one to go to before we wrap up, because I think it gets to a lot of the issues we talked in the presentation. The first is, and speaking to how Keca said this all comes from the top, if this is important enough, consider making it mandatory. In our case, this is not an optional meeting. Our sales team stops taking calls during these times. Our product and engineering team break. Our marketing teams breaks, because we believe that it's so core to the company culture that we create an hour and a half a week that we're all together in the same space talking about it. The second, which is, a little bit less top down, is just pay up for really good food. I promise you,
Yeah.
if you have some really great restaurant that's catering, people are going to want to show up. And then the third thing I just say is take a step back and really just see, like, is that meeting driving value, right? This should be a time that reinvigorates people, that they feel that they're connecting to their team, that they feel like they can take a break from what they're doing day to day and week to week and think and talk about the business. And so is that meeting really providing value for your team? And if it isn't, think about how you might restructure it so that people want to be there. And Keca, I think maybe we should go to that last question by Shane, because I think it's a really good one that we could address.
Go ahead. Why don't you read it, and then we'll finish up.
So videos, the question was, video segments and going for a walk-in interview could be off-putting to candidates as it adds more effort to the recruitment process. This is fine when there are lots of candidates, but how do you balance a unique interview process that promotes culture with a candidate effort when the role is so specific that there aren't many candidates to choose from? So I think this is a really thoughtful question. I'll take this. And so again, nothing's a one size fits all. The purpose, I think, of Keca saying have a non-traditional unique interview process is, at the end of the day, is it should increase candidate conversion, and it should help those candidates be more successful when they first start at the company. And so if a set of practices aren't increasing your conversion, and if they're not preparing those candidates to be more successful, then be flexible in whatever set of practices you think will do that, right? But that's the goal. And what I would say is I'd actually probably disagree a little bit. I actually think these extra special things are more important when you do have few candidates, because when you only have 3 candidates that you were able to find to fill a role versus when you have 40, you have to make sure that those candidates have such a unique, positive, remembering experience that they want to choose you over other people. So I actually think it's the opposite, whereas when you have less candidates for a role, that you have to give those folks a more unique experience in the interview process, because we need to increase our ability to convert those more in-demand candidates.
Agreed. Shane, I can also follow up with you because we are at the top of the hour. And if anyone else, again, has any other questions, and we will try to get back to the other folks on the question line, we will respond, either Jason or I, to them. But we want to thank everyone for joining us today. It was a pleasure. I speak on behalf of Jason and Comparably, and myself and the rest of the Phenom team. Thanks you so much.
Thank you all so much for attending. Keca, Phenom People team, you were amazing. Thank you for having us as your partner on this one.